Hi, welcome to Focus Talk. Today we're going to have a conversation with Dr. Cordie Williams, who's an ex-Marine and a chiropractic doctor. He's also the founder of 1776 Forever Free, a community-based nonprofit organization. Dr. Cordie, thank you for coming on to our show.
Thanks for having me. It's really great to be here, Jenny. Really great.
Thank you. All right, so Dr. Cordie, let's first talk about this nuisance recall initiative. You're based in California, and I know your organization has been actively involved in the recall nuisance initiative. So maybe you can quickly introduce our audience to this whole thing. How did the recall start, and why do you believe Governor Newsom should be recalled?
Well, there was a guy that spent about 20 to 30 years in the sheriff's department named Orrin Heatley. And like a lot of Californians, he was just fed up with the tyranny that's going on here. I mean, Jenny, for years we've had leaders that have no fiscal policy. They can't handle their piggy bank. They can't handle their finances. These are dictators or tyrannical leaders that are fine with illegal immigration and having families like yours and mine pay taxes for people that didn't get in here the right way. They're okay with places like San Francisco ending up as homeless encampments and giving more rights to the homeless than to the folks that are working hard with their blood, sweat, and tears to raise their small businesses and raise their families. And, you know, you go to places like San Francisco, Jenny, you see homelessness and lawlessness everywhere. There's defecation on the streets. I was in a couple of weeks ago with Scott Pressler, a good friend of mine. There's literally folks injecting heroin into their bloodstream and their veins on the streets. Wow. And you've got needles everywhere as well. So those are just some of the many examples of a lack of leadership in California. So Orrin Heatley, Mike Netter, a man named Randy Economy, all said, you know what, enough is enough. And I guess it was late May, early June, Orrin submitted the petition, it got approved, and here we are 6-7 months later with over 2.1 million signatures.
Can you give us an example why you say there was a tyranny in California, the leadership?
Yeah, well, I mean, COVID would be the most recent, example of that. But, it's kind of like the 13 colonists said early on, taxation without representation. It's the whole idea that there's one narrative. It's really what's going on in the United States. There's one narrative that matters, and the voice of one group matters, not the voice of everyone. And this flag behind me and the souls that are 6 feet under, the names on the Vietnam Memorial, the names on the tombstones at Arlington, they stood for equality for everybody, regardless of your race, your gender, your creed, what your orientation is, what your religious or spiritual affiliation is. They stood for all of us. And that's what's not happening in California. And there are cities around the country that also exemplify a lack of leadership like what we're seeing in California. Chicago, DC, Portland, it's the same old song and dance really in these blue cities, if you will.
So you're saying that Governor Newsom is enforcing these lockdown policies that encroach upon people's constitutional rights, like authoritarian government. Is that what you're?
Yes, ma'am, I am, and I'm also saying just the lack of equality for everyone. When you have a policy, when you have a social policy that has a political agenda or political spin to it, and it starts to elevate one group while bringing down another, there's a problem there. That's not fundamentally, our liberty, which is endowed to us by our Creator, endowed to us by our God. I always say freedom is from government, liberty is from God. Our liberty that we get from our Creator, that liberty is designed for all of us to be able to raise families in peace and love the way we see fit. And the moment that government starts to encroach on that, whether you see illegal immigration coming in, people being lawlessly murdered by these folks that just came in unlawfully. I'm all about lawful immigration. I'm all about folks coming in who want to get away from a tyrannical government and come in here and finding a home and raising their family, but not when it interferes with mine. And so seeing a governor that supports things like that, as well as, basically, in my opinion, death on the streets, incentivizing drugs, incentivizing homelessness. We've got the one of the highest tax rates in the country. Our unemployment up there, we're second or third in GDP, and the leadership, whether you look at Jerry Brown's administration or you look at Newsom's, the only thing that you can think is that it's not only socialist, it's not only communist, but it's not leadership at all. Because there's no, I'm going to lead from the front. I'm going to lead by example. And the lockdowns are just another more recent example of that, but three different shutdowns. And he's constantly pandering to us about, everything from, wear your face mask and, you can't have a business open, but Hollywood's open. If you look at the lady, I think it was LA, that literally her restaurant's closed down. Right next to her restaurant, my good friend Angela, right next to her restaurant, they were running like regular, like Hollywood productions, and they had an outside seating area, but she was shut down.
So now that the collected signatures have surpassed 2 million, what's next?
Well, it's to completely get the guy out. So, first of all, a lot of folks don't understand, just so, your viewers and my followers really understand what they're dealing with here. Now that we have 2.1 million signatures, the other side has 45 days to get those signatures rescinded. It's not going to happen. They've got to get about 700,000 signatures. So if they were to do that, I don't think, with all the national press this recall's gotten, I don't think it would pass a sniff test, first of all. But then after that, there's going to be a special election. But I think Californians spoke loudly 2.1 million times. They're going to speak loudly again when the special election comes along. And I hope, I just would love for somebody like Rick Grinnell to run for office. There are a host of other great candidates. Obviously, I'm not endorsing anybody, but, after Mr. Grinnell said the speech he said at CPAC, I think, man, if he ran, wow, wouldn't that be just an exciting thing for California? But really what's next is to go in and take this model that Mr. Heatley and others like Mike Netter and Randy Economy have created. And in my opinion, it's for other states to start to replicate what they did. Because if Tyranny's not in your backyard yet, it's coming to a theater near you soon. And the folks in Washington are trying to ensure that.
So this is actually one of the longer-term consequences of this recall initiative, right? It doesn't stop there with the recall of Governor Newsom. But do you see there are other longer-term consequences?
Well, as far as if you mean for politicians, yes, I think that people are starting to answer and basically say, not only do they want to take back their country, but they want to take back their state. So I think this is a shot across the bow, to use, a Marine Corps wartime military, phrase, that this is a shot across the bow that folks aren't going to take tyranny anymore. Americans want to raise their families how they want to raise their families. And the moment the government starts to cross that line, that's when patriots and Americans and Californians need to push back.
Well, interesting. You just mentioned Marine Corps terminology. You're an ex-Marine, so could you share with us, with our audience, a little bit about your Marine experience and how has that experience helped to shape who you are and what you do today?
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate that, Jenny. And a lot of folks use the term former because what they say is, once a Marine, always a Marine. And I tend to agree with that, but I know what you meant. But just to qualify it, because some of the folks out there, they're like, oh, X, and they get these shrills in their body. So we don't want that to happen. But I know what you meant, and I'm not here to mince words or anything like that. But I appreciate you saying that. The Marine Corps is probably 80% of who I am. I started out as, an 18-year-old kid, didn't really know what he was going to do with his life and didn't have a lot of guidance or, believe it or not, self-esteem. And the Marine Corps gave me that. But I've always said, there are four things that I stand for. I stand for Jesus Christ. I stand for the flag. I stand for my boys and my kids. And I stand for this country. I stand for this country and those values that we were given and the souls that are 6 feet under. And I think that needs to be brought back to the forefront of, Americanism, right? That type of those good-hearted values, right? And the ability to, this one of the greatest things about our country is you're able to come from nothing and get everything.
Yep.
Your limitation, your ceiling is only limited upon you. And I think we need to get back to that, not only with the way that we vote and with our election process and getting more election transparency out there, but just as a whole from a social standpoint as well.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that. Once a Marine, always a Marine. I will remember that. So, so tell us a bit more about your organization. It's called 1776 Forever Free. Why that name?
Well, the Declaration of Independence was signed on July 4, 1776, and it was that pivotal point in American history where the 13 colonies and the colonialists, after a tyrannical government tried to take away their rights, they said, we don't want taxation without representation, and they pushed back. And they said, we want a different form of government that represents everybody, that's for the people and by the people. And when they pushed back, it was their way of just saying enough is enough. And we're kind of at that point right now in history. And I kind of innately, after my video, the Megaphone Marine video, where I spoke at the Sacramento Capitol, turned my hat backwards, and it got about 17 million views. 17.1 million plus people like that. And it was my way of saying, you know what? Tyranny's here again. And we don't want it, and we're not going to have it. And so 1776 Forever Free was just that way of bringing folks together under the flag, and really saying, hey, if you stand for red, white, and blue, and you stand for those that can't stand for themselves, we don't care about race, we don't care about gender, we don't care about what you kind of associate yourself with or what you identify with, meaning we want everybody, anybody and everybody that wants choice in their life. Mm-hmm. That's what this organization stands for.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure there are a lot of similarities that you see between America today and the America of 1776. But I think there are also some differences. So could you expand on that a little bit? What do you see are the similarities and the differences?
Well, I mean, one of the prominent differences I see is I think there's a push for God to be taken out of not only schools, because we can already see that with the Pledge of Allegiance. We can already see just the lack of God everywhere. I mean, anywhere you see God, they're literally trying to remove it. And that would be a stark contrast to, the founders of this country. There's multiple ways that you can see evidence of that they were founders that had a strong God pursuit, a strong belief in Christianity. Thomas Jefferson, never went to church, but he was constantly in the word of Jesus Christ. He was constantly looking at the Bible and trying to better himself. So that would be a stark contrast. I think another stark contrast would be, there used to be a lot of patriotism. And now there's tons of folks that are watching, NFL programs, Major League Baseball, basketball, and they're kneeling. They're kneeling for the national anthem, and they're acquiescing to some of the demands of this masking mandate, which is it's not a law, it's a mandate. Just because Sleepy Joe puts it into place doesn't mean that it's a law. It's still a mandate, happens to be a federal mandate, because we know executive orders are only suggestions. That would be another stark contrast. In 1776, and then when the Constitution was enacted, not the Articles of Confederation, but the Constitution, which I believe was 1785 or 1787. I just actually was looking at that date today. But when the Constitution was actually brought into its inception, there were so many patriots and so many folks that said, you know what, if we're going to enact a law, we can't have a executive order. It has to pass both branches of government. But some similarities is, Americans want their freedom. Mm-hmm. Americans want choice. And I think you're starting to see that in these cities where governors are getting a little bit too tyrannical. State and local governments are pushing back. And so that's the American way, in my mind, Jenny. It's under tyranny. Americans are going to say, yeah, we're not going to buy this. We want liberty.
I actually saw a tweet a couple weeks ago by Senator Marco Rubio. he make this interesting comparison, which a lot of Chinese make. I just want to quickly read for you what he says in his tweet. He said, quote, "Cancel culture, censorship, and runaway wokeness have placed us on the edge of a culture revolution. Where, like Mao, the goal is to destroy the four olds: old ideas, old customs, old habits, and old culture. Wake up to this insanity, or social and political catastrophe await." Now, a cultural revolution is a period in China's history. That was a crazy 10-year between 1966 to 1976. So during that time period, traditional Chinese culture was destroyed and intellectuals were persecuted. So that's like really dark and crazy time period. And I couldn't agree with Senator Rubio more on this comparison. But I do see something below his tweet that kind of echoes with what you just said. This person sent a tweet as a reply to Senator Rubio's tweet. And she says, old ideas like hating those who aren't like you, old customs like slavery, old habits like joking about racism, old culture like the white supremacy. You're right, we are canceling all of that. Now, I have to tell you, I'm a bit shocked when I saw this tweet. But then I realized that in their minds, in these people's minds, the old, so-called old America was full of hatred or racism. So I think that may explain what you just said, the difference between nowadays versus the 1776. But why is that? Why do these people think that way?
Well, I have so many things that were running through my mind when you said that. First off, I would say, I'm 50-50 on Mr. Rubio because, there's so many of these politicians that have 20, 30 years in politics, 10, 15, whatever it is, and they never do anything to really change policy. They'll certainly have a soundbite that sounds really sexy and it sounds great, but jury's still out on a lot of these guys. And I'm not going to say Mr. Rubio is one of them. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. There's so many rhinos out there that we could own the safari, as far as a patriotic conservative. And so I don't really know where he stands from his rhetoric. I agree with a lot of what he said. What I would add to the tweeters, I guess you call it a tweeter, the person that replied, is that, that's exactly what's wrong with America right now, that comment, because it's ignorant. And the reason it's ignorant is because history is designed to allow us to see what isn't working. And by looking at history, you can say, well, here's what I want to change. Obviously, the context of a senator in the United States Senate. It's one of a patriotic vibration. It's one that stands for the American flag. It's one that stands for right and wrong. And this stands for everybody, regardless of race, creed, color. This wokeness vibration that's out there that everybody should be a victim and everybody's a martyr and nobody can overcome their circumstance. And this 1619 crap that's out there. First of all, slavery was going on but way before 1776. Yep. And our country said in 1776, the colonialists said, you know what, we want to break away. We want to be something different. We never said something perfect. We said something different, something that's set apart. And it's just like a broken family. It takes time to repair that family. How long are people going to continue to look in their rearview mirror instead of looking in their front windshield for what God has in store for them, which is free and liberty under God? It's not perfect. No country in history has ever been. And the idea that we're going to establish some ideological utopia by trying to make everything equal and trying to make everything free is absurd. Look at San Francisco. Look at Seattle, right? Look at D.C. Look at Chicago. All these areas where everything's free and everything's a utopianistic ideal. Ask the people that stepped in human excrement in San Francisco on their way to work this morning or saw somebody shooting up heroin into their arm. They don't really share that belief. Or if they do, they're lying to themselves.
But this is why I brought up the Cultural Revolution, because during the Cultural Revolution time in China, the government did the same thing. they said the traditional Chinese culture was bad. There were a lot of bad things in the culture, so we need to burn the book, we need to burn the painting, we need to burn the statues. So as a result, people don't know what the true Chinese culture stands for. I think the similar thing happening here is like people here, maybe because of education or because some other propaganda, they don't know what the true American values or the true American culture stand for.
Yeah, Jenny, and that's what happened in World War II. A guy named Adolf Hitler, with killing millions of Jews around the world. And there are forces at play, I'm sure, that are trying to get us to forget about that. And how sad for the families if you're a descendant on a Jewish individual that went to Auschwitz, and that's going to be forgotten and not looked at. Because if we continue to look at what's ugly, we can prevent that ugliness from happening in the future. When we erase it and we eradicate it, those are the people that we want to question. Those are the people we need to be worried about. What are their true intentions? What's their long-term motive? I'm constantly just flabbergasted by the gaslighting going on and the fake news and the propaganda. Because Hitler's smiling in his grave right now. Khrushchev is smiling in his grave right now, because Khrushchev said, I think it was at a United Nations speech in 1956, I believe, he said, we're not going to kill you with our guns and our bombs and our bullets. We're going to kill you from within with division. And you're seeing that play out across the United States, and it's been playing out for probably the last 8 to 10 years, maybe longer.
So what do you think we can do? Like, what would be the ways to make people realize what's going on in this country, to let them wake up to the reality?
Well, I think it's a multifaceted attack. In the Marine Corps, my friend Colonel Jeff A. Powers, a retired Marine that wrote the scathing letter to the Roger Goodell of the NFL in 2017, I believe it was. It got about 71 million hits. He always teaches me, because I was, a supply guy, so I was not a grunt, an 0311, an infantry Marine, although all Marines are riflemen. He talks about interlocking fields of fire, which is if you had a 50 or 60 cal machine gun set up on the right, firing right to left, and another one set up firing left to right, and then 2 guns firing across, your enemy's pinned down. They can't go anywhere. So I don't think this is a unilateral approach that we need to hit. I think it's a multifaceted one. I think the first thing you need to do is educate. And that's why my organization, 1776 Forever Free, is committed to educating people on their roadmap to freedom, the Constitution, while also educating people about how to run for office. And then at the local level, what we want our super PAC that we're forming to do is now bring these candidates up at the local level. Because as we mentioned at the start of this program, or I think I mentioned it, the power is in the states. And people just don't realize how much power they have at the state level. There were 165 vacant seats in my county. San Diego County last year alone were anti-Americans, not Democrats. People that are totally against the flag, against the Constitution, walked into office unopposed. And so the question for my patriots and your viewers out there is, when are you going to level up and run for office? Because that's what this country needs. Because otherwise, the CCP that's already infiltrated this country they're going to be marching in the streets with joy, because we'll be a socialist communist regime.
Yeah, you just mentioned that your organization have this Constitution classes, right? It's a weekly Constitution classes. So what do you teach? And so far, how have people react to it?
Well, people love it, Jenny. We actually have people from all over the country. I'm a Jesus guy, and I don't judge people who aren't. I just love them up, like it says in the book of Matthew. But one of the things we always talk about is the Bible is your roadmap to salvation through Jesus Christ. Your roadmap to freedom, that's the Constitution. And everybody should know their roadmap to freedom, but so many people don't. So Doug Gibbs, who's been, working with the American Heritage Foundation for probably about 20 plus years, not to age Doug, sorry, Doug, is on my faculty at 1776. And we were actually, believe it or not, he tutors me, because I'm going to run for office someday after we get this organization as far and wide as we can across the United States and across California. And my mission is to know everything I can about my roadmap to freedom. And so I want people to dig in as much as they can. We talk about everything from the Second Amendment to, the Articles of, Incorporation, the Articles of Federation, when we actually got a Constitution, to the Second Amendment, to some of the things that are coming out now, like H.R. 5 and H.R. 1 and H.R. 127 that people need to know about. So we've been doing it about 14 weeks. Or I think maybe 12, 13. We'll go all the way to 14. So there's probably 2 more weeks. And then we're going to come out with a new product that does like a 45-minute submersion to give people the, biweekly or monthly kind of tidbits that they can walk away with.
That's great. Well, you just said that you're going to run for office. When? When are you going to run for office?
Well, to be continued on that. That's what my PR marketing people are saying. But, I think everybody should run. Honestly, if you have a red, white, and blue bone and you don't like what's happening, you should get a seat at the table. Because if you're complaining and you don't have a seat at the table, then really you just need to go home and stick your head in the sand, because the people that matter are the ones that level up and they put it all on the line. And our flag's worth it and our kids are worth it.
But now let's come back to this Recall Newsom initiative. Let's say Governor Newsom eventually is recalled. How much confidence do you have that the successor would be better?
Well, I mean, even if he just kind of drives the bus and does nothing, he couldn't make it worse off than it is right now. That's for sure. And California hasn't seen real leadership, in my opinion, since probably the days of Ronald Reagan. I mean, it goes back decades. But with the homelessness, the homeless encampments, and people just being fed up, people are tired of just having more money taken by the state of California. We're still paying for the train that goes to nowhere. We've got constant fires when the National Forest Service has given Gavin clear direction on how to do that. So, nothing's guaranteed in life, but I'd be surprised if we could get any worse than where we're at right now.
Are you aware of other grassroots efforts that are doing similar things as your organization?
Yeah, I know there's several organizations out there that want a different political party. I tended to lean that way initially, and then President Trump got behind the Republican Party, which, it's kind of one of those things. If you form a different party, you're going to split the vote and maybe end up with a guy like Sleepy Joe anyways that trips when he's walking upstairs and slurs speeches and forgets where he is. You might get that anyways, but ideally and hopefully by sticking with our current Republican Party that we have, while as imperfect, there are all sorts of things about it, right? And there are a lot of rhinos. There are certainly. We can start to shift and change it. And it starts at that local level. I know, there are several grassroots organizations, and, I apologize that I can't think of all of them right now, but that are doing great things around the country. I know individuals too. Pastor Brian Gibson, Pastor Greg Locke, Matt Couch, all good friends of mine that I've been on the road with. They're getting out there doing different rallies. Scott Pressler, another great patriot. Kit Cunningham, I could name so many individuals that are out there and moving and shaking. My friend, the Compton Conservative. There's so many out there. Crystal Tini. So many out there they care about America, and they're literally flying all over the country, getting involved, whether it's cleanups or voter integrity projects or whatever they can. Individuals are getting involved too, not just organizations. So it's a really, really beautiful thing on the other side of this tyranny. In the last 12 months of the freedoms that have been lost, there's been hope restored, I think, because of the way patriots have come together.
Yeah, that's great. I know a lot of people are worried about the direction this country is heading. Really, people are trying to do different things to really contribute to this whole freedom movement effort. So thank you so much, Dr. Cordie, for taking the time to share these important issues and thoughts of you with us.
Thanks for having me, Jenny. God bless you and Semper Fi.
Thank you, and all the best with your future endeavors. Okay, everyone, thank you for watching Focus Talk. That was my conversation with Dr. Cordie Williams. We'll see you next time.